And here's a little texture, the texture of it. The university people we wanted to build descriptive models of student thinking. The teachers were interested in all the exceptions. They were really concerned about the kids our models weren't working for, because those were the kids who were their highest priority. So it required coming up with a new form of research. And what we produced, there are 12,000, 13,000 kids this summer using this, and there'll be 60 districts using it in next year, is university tools that schools own. And you'll see here when you look at the materials that because we work in Texas, we have to build language instruction into all the materials we use. Literally getting electronic copies of the textbooks, finding all the words students don't know, building them systematically into the lessons for students. And let's see. Always, in years, they're going to joke about this technology. So what we've decided to do is to teach kids in all these districts that the mind is like a muscle, and that when you struggle in math, something's happening in your head. What's happening in your head is that you're growing dendrites. So if you're not struggling, your brain is not growing. And I love the ethnographers' reports from these schools. Now the most common form of teasing in some of these schools is, ain't no dendrites growing over there. So we've solved some problems, but not other problems. What we've learned is that most of today's kids who are struggling have no history of ever remembering a time they were succeeding. So we've actually built into their algebra courses 6 instances where students are supposed to get stuck, and then there are units which explicitly teach them how to get unstuck, so that students have little videos and they can see other students frustrated and what it looks like. We've taught them how learning is supposed to feel. And for many of us, math faculty, we were surprised that the kids we were interviewing had never heard about backsliding. They never heard about conceptual leaps. And we've had to actually build this into their courses. Most of the kids, a majority, did not know the names of the courses they'd be taking in 2 years. So years ago, when kids took algebra, they were college tracks, so they knew the names of courses. Not anymore. So I'm not going to demo you to death, but the idea is we now have instructional units, 400,000 students online, 6,000 teachers in these high-poverty schools, where the accident of where they go to school is not actually limiting what kinds of things they get to learn. One should not believe that we've solved all of these problems. We've generated a mass of data that would support hundreds of doctoral dissertations. How do you design the best problems for particular kids and topics? How do you create characters that students identify with? So, in summary, when we go out to work with schools, we had better be sure we understand their strengths, or we will not build anything that will work. And we have to understand the strengths at every single level of the system. When we go into schools, we can't go in just as traditional researchers trying to build new worlds. We have to understand the context in which we're working, the strengths of that context, and we have to work collaboratively with teachers because everything they get gets filtered through their views. Right? And this takes relentless persistence because teachers are new to being invited into these processes. And the first stages of discussion are mostly their imagining of what they would like to have, not what they would actually use. And lastly, it's going to require every bit of research skill that we have to go into these schools because the problems are genuinely hard. And we have to use our strengths of having procedures that prevent us from drinking our own Kool-Aid. If we do this, as we've done in math in Texas, we now, with Maryland and Massachusetts, are at the top of the country. In every other field, Texas is subpar. Right? Same accountability system, same policies. Texas is at the top in math, along with you guys, subpar in every other subject. They used to say to improve education in Texas, you have to move the state north. We've shown that universities can play over time a powerful role in improving disciplinary learning. But it's going to require something which is not our primary strength, a kind of humility. The humility that we recognize from our research work, as opposed to the arrogance we sometimes experience as regular citizens in working in other people's gardens. Thank you.
Uri, thank you so much for a marvelous presentation. It was everything we had hoped for and more. And what was so wonderful about it, there was a hopeful message here. And it makes all of us feel like, I think, energized and ready to pursue the effort that needs to be undertaken to get to where we need to be. I also want to say how proud I felt about seeing what has happened in the Maryland schools. And so, Nancy, I think we all owe a tip of the hat to you and the work that you and your colleagues are doing to phenomenal results. We are going to now have a chance to engage Uri in some questions and answers. So let me just start, Uri, with two questions that I hope, I think, are there microphones for people to, they're supposed to be. There will be. But let me start with really two questions. One of the things that you stressed, we all know about UTeach, of course, but one of the things you stressed that I think is so very important is reaching out to the existing pool of teachers in our schools, because for our lifetime, that will be, it'll take a long time for those teachers, they're going to be in those careers for some time, and so for the next 10 years, they're going to be the primary teaching force. What I wondered is, what % of the teachers are you reaching? So that's question one. And are there strategies to basically make this universal in Texas? And the second is, and I think this is a really important question, I so often hear from faculty when they get involved in outreach that there's no reward within the university structure for that kind of intensive effort. And I wondered if that has been addressed at Texas, UT, and if so, how? So those are my two questions.
So we've learned a lot about how to work with teachers, and one of the ideas that we've discovered painfully is that scaling up doesn't work. Models of professional support that depend on voluntarism are not going to change core practices. So we have wonderful projects of faculty members throughout the state who would get a grant and would offer Saturday workshops. Just as you've learned here in the University of Maryland projects I saw last night, that doesn't produce lasting effects on systems. So we have a system of teachers voting to join us as a team. And that really matters a lot when teachers know they had a blind ballot to decide whether they want to take on work collectively. It's not that it always works. Sometimes we discover there are 3 or 4 people we'd rather not be in the meeting, right? So it's not like we do it as a matter of absolute principle, but we work with the great majority of teachers in any school we work with, because that has some chance of scaling. And also with the administrators. Efforts that work with teachers without their administrative teams quickly disappear when the next administrator comes